Thank you very much. That is not the most flattering picture in the world. I will have to have a moment about that. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully, we're all doing well. I know it's been a long morning full of lots and lots of sessions, so I'm all that's standing in between you and a break. I will not overrun, I promise. Make sure I kept the time. So I was given the opportunity, and I really wanted to go through some of really the points that were made earlier from Eddie and Simon around what are we doing with AI, what are we doing with productivity. There's a couple of bits I'll skip over, because what I really want to spend the time on is what have we actually done? It's all well and good talking about AI, and everyone I think in the room knows how important AI and productivity is. What are people actually doing with it? What have we set up with some of our customers? What are public sector organizations actually focusing on? I shall skip over some of these bits. So 4 things. I'll skip over some of the initial bits. One of the things I wanted to cover initially was just really 2 points that we've seen from a lot of our organizations on what they care about and what they're focusing on. Evolving citizen needs and leveraging AI. I think Eddie's slide deck and graphs really, really highlighted the first piece earlier. Citizen needs have changed. They will continue to change. I was looking at some stats actually in the background as I was building this deck, and it was shocking to me how many requests and messages and emails and phone calls public sector organizations get. I think the average for HMRC, as an example, is 100,000 pieces of contact per day. It's around about 1.8 million per month on average. DEFRA, I think, have about 500 individual services that they can offer. There's lots. There's lots and lots and lots of different things that these organizations do. Citizens now are coming to expect speedy responses and AI to be used across the board. If I go into a doctor's office or a hospital, I just naturally now expect AI to be used somewhere. Maybe I'm a bad example because I'm very, very involved in AI, but I think this is something we need to consider. So expectations are incredibly high from our citizens, and they will continue to be high. AI, I can gloss over. It's been mentioned 1,000 times today. It will continue to be mentioned. It's here. It's not the next big thing. It is the thing. So when we come to have conversations with our customers, 3 things that we focus on: enhancing efficiency, improving service accuracy, and then increasing citizen satisfaction. Again, I can gloss over this for the most part. It's been mentioned a few times. Accuracy obviously is important. To Eddie's point around the common sense pieces, we have to make sure that if we're leveraging AI and trying to increase productivity, that what it's providing us is accurate. Otherwise, it's not that useful for the most part. And obviously operational efficiency. The reason that we're doing this is to make everyone more efficient. Ben, I think it was one of the points that you raised a minute ago actually around how do we actually enact this on people? How do we make people care? If you were to come to me and say, Callum, I've got an AI tool that's going to save you 10 hours a week, which means you can do loads more work for exactly the same pay, I'm probably not going to be that interested for the most part. What we focus on instead is what satisfaction is it going to give me? Generally speaking, people want to do well in their jobs. People care about the things that they do. If you're a healthcare provider providing a service, you care about those people. I care about helping our customers. So the piece that I really focus on for that is what are those things? And that's different for everyone, right? Every single person you speak to will have different motivations. Part of what we do and part of this is what are those motivations and how do we get there? But as I said, I wanted to spend more time on what are customers, what are people for us actually doing? And there's a couple of examples that I want to show and I can talk over. This is essentially where AI is being leveraged in organizations that we work with. So London Borough of Newham. This is one that we're publishing now. We have a case study with. And the specific example here was around procurement. So I think, like most organizations, procurement is incredibly important, but was a huge blocker for London Borough of Newham in a lot of their processes. I think someone mentioned earlier the processes of tendering new build homes. Procurement was a blocker for that in Newham because there was a huge process that no one really understood. There was a group of maybe 6 or 7 procurement advisors and procurement professionals who were getting tons and tons and tons of different requests every single day, lots of which probably actually they didn't really need to answer. They were simple requests, simple things that people just didn't understand because the process was, around for years and quite convoluted. That was the ask of us. How do we leverage AI? What can we do with AI to speed up this process? How do we get less questions? And how can we spend our time actually, instead of asking and answering those questions, changing the process, improving, simplifying, and focusing on those big ticket items? So we made a bot. We made an agent. It was called Agent Ali. Ali, in this instance, was the head of procurement. So Ali is now everywhere within London Borough of Newham anytime you ask a procurement question. And really, the idea around Agent Ali was to be that Q&A bot. So it wasn't particularly evolved. It wasn't particularly exciting. All it was there to do was get a question from someone that said, I've got a tender that I need to respond to, or I've got this procurement question, can you help? And within a couple of seconds, it was answering that question. So I think there's stats on the screen of how much it saved, 50% less questions for the procurement team, 2 hours per worker per week. When you extrapolate that over a year, huge, huge, huge time savings, which is great. We're making efficiency gains. There's more to it than that. Actually, what this meant was hugely improved service levels for everyone who had to interact with the procurement team, because they weren't waiting hours for answers to their questions. They had access to all of the documentation immediately. They could use the agent to interpret that documentation to get the answers that they needed. When someone was then responding to a tender request or a procurement question they've got, instead of having to put their contacts off or maybe give information that they didn't totally understand, they'd leverage the agent to do it instead. So in the case of new build homes, that's way faster now. The big thing I wanted to highlight here is the efficiency gains above and beyond just increased productivity. 2 hours a week per worker, great. What does this actually mean for homelessness, as an example? We need to make more homes to make less people homeless, or we need to house these people faster. How do we do that? We leverage tools like this that will speed up that process and allow people to get into accommodation faster, allow people to answer their questions quicker. So this is one example. This is, again, really, really simple to build. Anyone, in my view, with a procurement process can do something similar. It isn't that complicated. It's not the most exciting use case in the world, but it saves time and it works. So that's example number one. Example number two then was around what we call smarter workflows. So this doesn't have to be agent specific. This just can be, how do we leverage AI across our organization to make improvements? There's a few examples here. So if any of you have bites on LinkedIn, you will see lots and lots and lots of posts around our work with NHS England and lots of different NHS organizations as part of that. And there's three things that I've wanted to highlight. So our process with NHS England and the trusts have been to do promptathons. So we've essentially got lots of people in a room for a day and have said, okay, for the first half an hour or an hour, forget Gen AI exists. Forget Copilot, forget whichever AI you're using. All we want from you is to tell us what current processes you absolutely hate. What do you not like about your job right now? What takes you a lot of time? What makes you anxious and stresses you out? Give us that information, and let's work backwards from there and see how AI can help. And these are three examples that have come out of our promptathons, what we've done. First one, AI in CV screening. So again, if anyone works for the NHS here, you'll know there are thousands and thousands of different job roles open at any time, and within each of those job roles, hundreds and hundreds of applicants. If you're someone who has to go through and screen those CVs, essentially, and review candidates, make decisions, that takes a hell of a lot of time. I believe each individual worker works on at least 200 vacancies or so at a time on average. So each person, each recruiter who screens those CVs is on around 200 vacancies at a time. Again, each vacancy with 200-300 people, it adds up really, really quickly. So what we did was we used Copilot, so they had Copilot in that specific organization, and essentially used Copilot to say, here's an incredibly long prompt. Here are the things for these specific roles that I'm looking for. Here are the metrics that I'm particularly interested in. Go through now these 200, 300, 400 CVs and screen them and give me an output at the end. Give me a table for how each of those candidates score against my criteria. It's exactly what that person would have done themselves. Instead of writing on a bit of paper, let's get Copilot to do it instead. What that essentially allows us to do, there's still a human at the end of that. There's still a person actually reviewing those CVs, but for obvious examples where people just weren't the right fit, or someone had just mass clicked through LinkedIn and pressed apply and actually didn't really review what the application was, we could get rid of those and say, we know they're not right. Now for the whatever percentile we're focusing on, for the top 10% of those CVs, now let me screen them and decide who I think is best. exactly the same methodology that recruiter was using, just putting it into a chatbot instead. And I think the average savings for that I'll come on to in a second, actually, because I've got all the savings and times listed, but it was massive. Second one was with Hillingdon. So Hillingdon in London have a process called alcohol recovery. This is essentially kind of a triaging process to make sure that people who suffer with issues related to alcohol are seen faster and go through the recovery process as quickly as possible. Again, anyone who's done any triaging or knows anyone who's done any triaging at points knows that it takes a lot of time to triage. You've got lots of data points and lots of different people involved in that triaging process. All we did here was put Copilot into that triaging process to say, okay, what's the issue? Rate the severity of that issue. Tell me why you rated that severity. Let me do the review of that content to understand why have you decided that this person needs to be seen next week and this person can be seen in 6 weeks. Let me review that and let me make the final decision on what to do, and then suggest who I need to triage this to, what the route is, and go and do it for me. So it's automating the process, again, still with human input, so we're still doing the final review, essentially, of that, but we're getting AI to do the really lengthy, boring process of the paperwork and the who does it need to go to, and let's do the decision-making. Again, massive time savings. And then finally, complaints management. Complaints are a thing. Complaints would always be a thing within any public sector or any organization, full stop. I think on average, it was around 1.4 or so million complaints that were received in the NHS last year, which is a lot of time, or 1.6 million. So every medical lead, every person who really heads up a department or is responsible for anything within any public sector organization will at some point receive complaints. This was an agent that we'd created to respond to those complaints. So a lot of the time, there were things that you could respond to that already had documentation attached. So if it was someone complaining of how long it took in the waiting rooms, generally speaking, there is a canned response of, okay, here's why it took so long, here's what that means, sorry, thanks very much. We don't need someone to go through those complaints every single day. What we really care about is what complaints were received that we need to do something with. Is it someone complaining for the sake of it, or is it actually something that is systemically wrong with the way that we do things that we need to change, and how do we filter that out? If you're getting a human to do that, it takes a lot of time. Getting an AI to do it is significantly quicker and allows those people to focus on the things that really, really matter and are going to improve service for people. So what did they look like? So in terms of time savings, CV screening, we proved had a 98% efficiency improvement. So this was essentially 98% less time for recruiters to spend reviewing CVs and instead putting them through the process. Each individual worker worked on around 200 unique roles at any time, and there were potential savings of around £20,000 per month per reviewer based on that 98% efficiency improvement. And if anyone's interested in any of these stats, we've got facts and figures in the back from all of these promptathons of how did you get to that number. But again, for every single person that reviews a CV, £20,000 per month is a lot of money. Alcohol recovery in Hillingdon then. So efficiency improvements were around 37.5 hours a week. So a worker's work week. It could be applied to all users that worked across the alcohol recovery service in the NHS. So if any of the organisations that anyone knows or anyone works with have alcohol recovery procedures, it can be essentially lifted and shifted straight into that. And time savings of 150 hours per month per triage. And the big thing they were concerned about, obviously, was this could save people's lives. If we could triage people faster and potentially save someone a week of waiting, that could save someone's life. Last piece then, complaints management. So around about 90% efficiency improvements for complaints management for everyone who manages complaints across the NHS. It's 224,405 complaints handled a year by the NHS, which I think was around 1.6 million hours saved. There we go, that's where my stat was from, which equated to around about £41 million. I will not promise that I can save the NHS £41 million. This is just what we've had on a small scale, but these are the kinds of cost savings and efficiency improvements that we have proved we can make by doing this with people who actually go through these processes. This wasn't a management discussion of we think we could do this. This was us working with recruiters, with people from the Alcohol Recovery Centre, with people who manage complaints and proving how much time this could save. That's all great. The last thing I really wanted to cover, which I kind of referenced earlier, was the difference this makes to people in the public sector and to citizens. So if I can save £41 million for the NHS, amazing. What that actually means is service is considerably better than what it is now. People are significantly happier. We're identifying issues faster, fixing those issues faster, and saving lives. So again, coming back to Ben's point earlier, our selling point for the users isn't we'll save you £40 million, we'll give you so much more work to do. It's if we can enact these processes, if we can do this on a large scale, we can give you more time to do the things that matter. The things that matter are providing service to citizens and making sure that everyone is in a good place, essentially. Reducing homelessness, improving service levels across every public service that we have, essentially. That's the point of doing all of this. It just helps when we've got the efficiency gains to prove it as well. So our big three things, really: redefining productivity, eliminating repetitive tasks, and the human is at the forefront. Every single use case we focus on has a person somewhere that we're considering to help out. That is everything from me. Thank you very much.